everybody's favorite way to go kill people, artillery. During the Civil War, they were very unique. But the saddest thing is that nobody knows how they even work, which is sad because everybody wants to know the history of best ways to kill people. Now, the cannon I am right next to right now is a 12-pounder light Napoleon, and it's a smooth bore. We'll get into the difference between rifled and smooth bore later, with my rifled example being the 3-inch gun right there, which is extremely powerful. But how do all of these cannons in this park, or like any single battlefield park in the world, even work? As long as it's a Civil War one, then I can explain it. If it's a modern day one, this is about the Civil War, not modern day. Now, this is probably the most famous example of a Civil War cannon. When you think of a Civil War cannon, you come up with these green, smooth bore, Napoleon cannons, and that's okay, yes. Those were used during the Civil War. They were also used before the Civil War. They were used, actually, I'm pretty sure it was used during the Napoleonic Wars. They're old. Now, this is the rounds that it fires, 12 pounds, hence the name 12-pounder, which is pretty light for this cannon. For the others, they're like 90-pound cannons. Those are extremely heavy, so don't try to lift them up. But you probably know that it needs gunpowder to fire. How do you get the gunpowder in? Well, there's a common misconception that you take a bucket, pour the bucket in, filled with gunpowder, put the ball in, ding, and then fire with a match or a lighter or whatever you can use. That's not true. The gunpowder is in a cloth bag, a very thick cloth bag, with the bullet, with a big wooden wad, and then the bullet right on top of it, which the cannonball right on top of it is strapped on. Shove it in, then put it down, which is used by number 3. Make sure that when you load it, you don't be like this, or else if the gunpowder goes off, your hands are going to fly off along with the rod. So you don't want that to happen. Instead, if safety care doesn't work that well, just hold it this way so that if the explosion happens, then you're only going to get a very serious burn and the rod flying into the enemy, which at least it's not as bad as a cannonball, but at least it's doing something. If it's not doing anything and also your hand is burned, you can't really do anything with the cannon anymore. So with all those safety measures, you're probably wondering, how do they aim? Although this is a smooth bore cannon, aka the least accurate cannon during the Civil War, it still had an aiming process. See this little hole here with a little screw? You're supposed to screw a sight in there. So down there, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's a bunch of holes in there, which you would stick a little sight. And there are 2 men who do it. The commander, because the commander's the most important person here, he knows everything. And then, of course, there's the number 3 guy, who also did this and did not burn his hand that badly. So they would stick a sight thing, and number 3 would put a stick into a little hole in there, lift it up so that he can move it in different directions, to move the cannon in different directions. In the back, there's a little screw to move the cannon up and down. And the commander would aim, and basically what he would do is say right, left, halt. So this is usually a surrender symbol, but in artillery during the Civil War, it means halt. Now, all that's nice, well and done. You got all the stuff in, the barrel's cleaned. I'll get into that later. But how does the actual thing fire? Well, remember that bag filled with gunpowder that was just shoved down into the barrel of this gaping mouth of a monster? Well, it's simple. You take a big-ass rod, a giant needle. Just imagine taking a branch making it really thin. That's what they use. I'm not sure if all of that will fit down the barrel of a Napoleon, but they used it. So what they would do is they go to another hole that is right above the gunpowder case, shove it down, break a hole into the gunpowder. Then right after that, the commander will also be using his thumb, not his actual thumb, because it's probably going to be burning hot if they had fired earlier. They would just put a little thumb, a glove for your thumb, put it above it, so that oxygen doesn't get in. And then, when it's ready to fire, they take a friction primer, or a long time ago, they would use a fuse. They would take a fuse, stick it in, and then they're gonna light it, and wait, and wait, and wait. See, there's a reason why they did not use it that much in the Civil War. And wait, fire! And then cannonball comes out. That's a solid shot, and starts bouncing around all over the place and knocking people's heads off, like in The Patriot, because that's literally what happened. It actually happened in real life. But during the Civil War, they did not want to use the fuses because, as you can probably tell, the fuses took a very hella long time, like 1 minute to fire it. That's bad. So during the Civil War, they used friction primers. Just take a big line with a little hook on it, connect it to a matchstick, stick it into the hole that you shove the rod down, and then put it down, make sure it's not lighted, and then you move back. All of the crew except for the commander and the gunner goes to make sure that their ears don't fall off, and the commander says fire. They yank on the string, the matchstick scrapes onto the metal, sending a burst of flames into the gunpowder and blowing up the gunpowder with its large grains of death, and then finally launching the cannonball out, find its target, which it will hopefully severely injure or, in most cases, kill. But, you see, there's a very big problem with this specific weapon, the 12-pounder smoothbore Napoleon cannon light. If you look inside of the barrel, there are no grooves. It's just smooth. It's a smooth bore. That's why they're called smoothbore cannons. That's a big problem, because now the cannonball's not going to spin. It's just going to go clang, 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 clang. It's not going to be accurate enough. Yeah, sure, you have an aiming tool, but it's not accurate. They had a solution. Rifling. They already put rifling in rifles and pistols. What if you put rifling in a cannon? That's exactly what they did in the Civil War. God, it's hot. So rifling is basically a bunch of grooves etched into the barrel of a cannon or a rifle or whatever you want to have rifling in. As long as it can shoot something and it has a barrel, then it can have rifling. So rifling, the cannonball or the shell, whatever you suppose, is going to catch on to the grooves and make it spin. And it also gets rid of the echo, so maybe that's an improvement. So you can see the rifling inside of it. When the cannonball comes out, it catches the grooves, which then makes it spin, just forces it, and bang, it's more accurate. It can go further. It's more deadly. But also there's something else that is very bad for that. Because it's a smooth bore, it doesn't need one of those mini ball shaped shells. It doesn't need this type of ammunition, except just make it much larger. Instead, it will just need the classic cannonball, which you probably know about as a ball. Now, this is not actually how big it is, of course. That is for muskets. But just imagine that bigger. That is what comes out of this because it's a smooth bore. Rifling, it's going to destroy the outcrops of it, create sparks, so they're going to have to replace it with little conical shaped balls. Oh god, that is very not 19th century. But still, it was a major improvement. This, you could aim at the patch of flowers down there and hit it. But if you try to aim at an enemy, literally an enemy troops coming, you're probably going to not hit it. But for the Napoleon, they decided to use that as an advantage. When a solid shot comes out, it just goes bounce, 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 and can cut somebody's head off, just like in the Patriot. That's a very gruesome scene. I do not recommend it. You're probably going to have nightmares after you watch it. Now, all of this is nice and well, but there's one thing. I'm talking about holes in the cannons. What holes? Now, this is the exact hole that you would put the fuse in. For example, if you want to make rapid firing with a friction primer, you would stick the match head inside of here, and then when you want to do something very terrible for your enemy, just pull on the string, go zip, jet of flames goes in, it's a barrel, voila! An extra amount of people dead in the war. Now over here are the places where you could place your sights. If you are aiming a little to the left, then you put the sight in here. If you're aiming a little to the right, you put the sight in here. If you're just aiming forward, you put the sight right here. Basically what you would do is you would take it, measure the distance, and with the little screw down here, just turn it. I obviously can't turn it. 1, they made sure that nobody can turn it. 2, I'm a child. I'm not a professional artillery gunner. So they would just look, aim, calculate the positions, and then number 3 will be back there with his big stick and stick it through a little hole. He would move it up so that he could move the entire cannon into different positions, which is very useful. That's basically how they aim, and that's how they fire, that's how they move the cannon. I think I just explained everything. Hold up! What did they even fire in the first place? They talked about solid shot. But what else did they even use? The 3-inch gun literally uses explosives. And because this one is conical and that one is round, what did they even use in the first place? That is very complicated. Usually they would use for a Napoleon cannon, which is far the most common cannon that they use in the Civil War. They would use a solid shot, which is essentially a big iron ball, which is the ones that you see in Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff. You know, fake movies. But they also use explosive shells, even in this big bad boy. So what they would use is basically essentially a big iron ball, but it's hollow inside of it. So there's a little hole in there, which they would fill up with gunpowder. That gunpowder will explode when ignited by fire or any sort of heat that is hot enough. So they would stick a fuse down there, shove it into the barrel, and when it fired, the gunpowder explosion would cause the fuse to light, and depending on the size of the fuse, then the fuse would burn for a couple of moments, and then when it's right above the enemy, it would just go boom, and shrapnel, aka the parts of the cannonball that had been ripped into shreds, fly everywhere and stab people to death. That is not something that you would want to happen to you, especially if those were much bigger than mini balls. That would literally cut your entire one half of your body off. Nobody likes that, because that would be annoying. Then you won't be able to play video games for the entirety of your life. Mainly because you don't have an arm. Secondarily because you're not alive. Now all that's nice and well, but let's take a look at a little bit of the barrel again so that you can understand how all of this worked. So as the round balls comes out, it would basically just knuckle around, just spin around, and makes it not that accurate. So if you add rifling to this cannon, then you cannot load a solid shot inside this. If you wanted to blow up a building or anything, then you would have to use a Napoleon cannon. If you want to use to lay siege to a city, for example, Atlanta, aka where I live currently, then you would have to use a rifled gun and, of course, a conical ammunition. Conical ammunition are usually not solid shot. They usually consist of a big tube, and on the very top there's a little hole for the fuse to go in and the gunpowder to go in. It essentially works the exact same way that a normal shell would work in this big bad boy. So with all the rifling and the smooth boring with the shells, conical shapes, hopefully I taught you something. Most likely you have no idea whatever the hell I just said. But before we end, I'm just going to tell you a bit about the crew. Now, the crew usually consists of a few people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 commander. That is very weird, but still, that's what they would use. So, as I mentioned, 3 would basically be helping with the aiming process, and also that part, the cool parts. 2 is responsible for pulling the string, which then causes the gunpowder to ignite, flaming out the gunpowder, which then launches the ball out into its target's face. And of course, 10 would be the commander, who actually does the whole aiming part. And all the other people, they do other things like number 1, after firing. Number 1, they would take a sponge, connect it to a stick, soak it in water, put it in to stop all the embers, take it out, then do it again to clean out all the solid stuff. Number 2 would then come in, and number 2 would just take a dry sponge, soak up all the water, come back. Then number 5, number 6, they're in charge of the ammunition. Number 5 takes the ammunition, puts it in a haversack, runs to the commander, and is like, "This okay?" If the commander says pass, then they can go and put it in. If they said denied, then all of that will happen, and he will be punished. And that is the essence of the cannon, the cannoneers, and the cannonball. So hopefully now you can understand more clearly about the best way to kill anybody in literally any single time part of history. The artillery piece. The world's favorite way to go kill people. And now you understand all the secrets about it.